Tonight on C-SPAN, former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski on the situation between Russia and Ukraine and the effect on European security. That's followed by IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde explaining a change in the U.S. economic outlook. And later, we'll look at allegations of corruption and fraud at the United Nations. As you just heard, we'll bring you IMF Director Lagarde tonight at 9:30. Here's a brief look at her remarks.
This is the last question.
Josh Boak, Associated Press. Madam Director, in the downward revision for growth in 2014, it looks like weather played a big role. What does that tell us about the stability and the resilience of the U.S. economy, given that outsized impact?
You know, I think it says two things. One is we believe that this Q1 result was a temporary occurrence with temporary outcomes that will be mitigated by stronger growth going forward in Q2, Q3, and hopefully ongoing. However, as you will have noted, we have revised down our forecast for growth trend in the United States to 2%. So, you know, we are facing this aging population issue. We are facing this relatively low productivity issues, which is why we are recommending various long-term policy reforms to address aging and productivity. But it tells us another thing, which is that extreme weather occurrences have a serious effect on the economy. And, you know, extreme weather occurrences have repeated much more frequently in the last 20 years than they had in the previous century. And I think that's, you know, a valid reason to wonder about climate change and how to deal with it. Incidentally, one of the tax recommendations that we put in this report deals with carbon tax.
And you can see all of IMF Director Lagarde's comments tonight at 9:30 Eastern here on C-SPAN. The Russian energy company Gazprom stopped supplying natural gas to Ukraine today. The New York Times reports that this happened after the government in Kiev failed to meet a 10 a.m. deadline imposed by Moscow to pay nearly a $2 billion installment for gas. A spokesman for the company said, quote, Gazprom supplies to Ukraine only the amount that has been paid for, and the amount that has been paid for is zero. The Wilson Center held a discussion on Russia and Ukraine today with former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Steve Pfeiffer and former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's an hour and a half.
Morning. Morning. Can you see? Morning, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Let's find seats. Okay.
Coming up tonight on C-SPAN 2, General Motors CEO Mary Barra on the delay in recalls of some GM vehicles. Then 4 Republican EPA administrators on the need for action on climate change. And later, the Wall Street Journal Chief Financial Officers Network Conference hears from security professionals on emerging cyber threats. Speaking of the Wall Street Journal, a story in that paper today on the GM ignition switch story, the new evidence that GM employees ignored warnings about defects in the years leading up to the company's 2009 bankruptcy came as lawmakers on the House panel questioned GM Chief Executive Mary Barra. An employee, Laura Andrus, told GM engineers that the 2006 Chevrolet Impala sedan she was driving in August 2005 shut off after she went over a bump in the road. In a later email, she warned that the problem appeared to be the design of the Impala's ignition switch and noted that a GM technician who looked at her car had said other employees had complained about a similar problem with the Saturn Solstice. Again, that part of a Wall Street Journal story today. Over on our Facebook page, we've been asking you today, do you trust GM? And here's some of what you've said. Robin posts, I do not trust GM. especially after listening to this panel this morning on TV. Any company that knows there is a problem with a product and passes it off as being safe for the consumer can't be trusted. Brian writes, I'll stay with Ford. It's good to see this CEO is taking some responsibility, but it's not enough. And Kim posts on Facebook, I have had 5 GM products in the past 20 years. All of our GM vehicles have been excellent. Now the testimony of GM CEO Mary Barra and the attorney who conducted the internal investigation. This hearing is just under 3 hours.